Guys, I'm Anxiety Disorder, and today I wanted to do a Magic the Gathering thing. I don't normally do, but with the silver border cards being legal in Commander, and Commander's my format, I wanted to just kind of do like a little deck tech of my favorite deck and what silver border cards I'm willing to put in that deck. So first, let's talk about the Commander, which is Tomorrow, Azami's Familiar. So if you've never seen this guy, he's 6 mana, big hefty price, for a 1/5, which is terrible body stats. So if you would draw a card, look at the top 3 cards of your library instead. Put one of those cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom in any order. So basically the idea of him is if you draw a card, you're going to anticipate, that's the card. And then you get to pick one of those 3 cards, so every time you draw a card, you're seeing 3. Which is pretty sweet. This guy's pretty cool. Also, his art's beautiful. Let's see if I can get a good little, without all this glare. But he's really cool. And honestly, if you really just like the Kamigawa Spirit cards, but couldn't find anything, this guy's a really fun one. But when I was building this deck, I was like, I don't know how I want to take this. Like, I could just play like Group Hug Mono Blue deck where everyone draws a bunch of cards. But then I started just going through a bunch of really cool old cards, and then at the time in Standard there was a combo called New Perspectives that gave me a huge inspiration on this deck, and I was like, maybe I could try to do that combo deck in Commander. Also, if you note, this sleeve is not the same sleeve as the rest of the deck. This one's actually a proxy because mine's off getting altered. So let's talk about the lands first, mainly because it's the most simple. So first we have, we have 3 cycle lands. These each have the ability to pay a certain amount of mana and cycle. They all intertapped and, add a blue. So I'm playing all 3 of these guys. I tried to stick as many cycling spells in the deck as I can, but also the most reasonable ones, which these lands are pretty great. In total, we're running 34 land. These are included into that. They're really useful, and you'll see why in a minute. Then we have a Cephalid Coliseum. This is an old, pretty sweet card from when I played Legacy and I played Dredge. So it doesn't enter the battlefield tapped or anything, but whenever you tap it for blue, you deal 1 damage to yourself. But if you have Threshold, you can tap it, sacrifice it, and pay a blue. Scratch that, reverse it. Pay a blue, tap it, sack it, and draw 3, discard 3. Which, because this deck is trying to mimic the New Perspectives combo, you may notice a thing where you're gonna have a lot of cards in your graveyard. Reliquary Tower, I honestly think that any deck that's in Commander needs one of these. Even if you don't plan on drawing a lot of cards with your deck specifically, someone at the table might be like willing each other for like 50 cards or something. So always run one of these, but it's really useful in this deck. We have a Nykthos. This is a combo piece, and also just, since I'm a monocolored deck, it's really easy to just generate a lot of blue devotion really quickly. And then 28 islands. I would actually recommend, if you want to build this deck or anything like that, I would recommend snow covereds, because we run extra planar lens, so snow covered is the way to go. But I'm cheap, so I don't have snow covered islands. Excuse me. Now let's go on to cycling spells. Let's talk about the creatures first. All the creatures are pretty much just junk trash creatures. This is the stack of them. The best one is probably these guys. Cloud of Fairies. If you resolve this, you get to untap 2 lands, which is pretty cool. Pauper Staple until it was banned. No, wait, no. Is this one banned? I know Peregrine Drake is banned, but I don't know if this one is. All the others are, like 3/4 cycler, 6/6 cycler for 7, flying 2/3 for 4, another flying 2/3 for 4. They really like flying 2/3s. No, this one's a 3/4. A Power Taint. I just love saying this one's name. Power Taint. The hollowed one, you can play him for free, basically all the time in this deck. A 4/4 for 7 Cycler. Probably the best beater in your deck. A Stripped River, and also probably one of the best arts, I will say. 5/5 Hexproof, cycles for 1. 5/5 can attack unless there are at least 5 more cards in my graveyard. Cycler for 1. So yeah, the creatures are just junk trash creatures, and if you're casting these guys, either you are in a tight spot or you better be winning the game. So now let's talk about the actual useful cycle spells in the deck. We've got a Complicate. So Complicate can counter a spell unless a player pays 3, so it's an overpriced mana drain. But you can also cycle it for the same cost and counter a spell unless they pay 1. So reducing the, taxed effect, but you also get to draw a card off of it, and they can't counter your Complicate. So if you're in a counter war, this can, or unless they stifle it or something, you can kind of get ahead with this. Hieroglyphic Illumination, so 1 mana you can draw a card, or 2 and discard this card. You can draw a card, or you can pay 4 to draw 2. Both effects are pretty useful. Rebuild, return all artifacts to the owner's hands. If someone's playing like a Brea deck, or just really trying to stack you out with artifacts or anything like that, this really can get around it. Plus, it's also a cycling spell. It's pretty good. Countervailing Winds. Countervailing Winds is always like counter target spell unless they pay like 6 or 7. So it's pretty damn good in the deck. It's also just another cycling spell. Vizier of Tumbling Sands. This is what ran the New Perspectives combo in Standard for a while. It's a really good effect, and if you can resolve cycle this and have like a mana rock on board, I highly recommend doing that. We have a Decree of Silence. This is a pretty great enchantment. For 8, you get an enchantment that says whenever it enters the battlefield, or whenever an opponent casts a spell, counter that spell and put a counter on this. If there are 3 more silence counters on it, sacrifice it. But it also can be cycled for 4, 2, and 2 blue to counter target spell, which is really good. So, Lake Claim, 7 mana, you can gain control of target permanent. That's pretty damn good. But it also cycles for 2. I'm not used to talking this much. Mage's Guile. Man, that's really hard to say. Target creature can't be targeted by instant or source, or can't be targeted by spells or abilities this turn. And then you can pay 1 blue to cycle it. So it protects your commander, which, if you didn't know, when you cycle a card, you get to look at 3 and then pick 1, so it's really useful. So you want to keep your commander around if it's on the board. Resend, it's a unsummon for very, very... actually, it's more of a boomerang for overcosted boomerang, but it cycles. Curator of Mysteries cycles for 1 blue, but it also is a 4/4 flyer that can, scry 1 every time you cycle. Censor, just a 4 spike for 1 extra, but you can cycle it. I don't even want to try this guy's name because I'm stupid. But it's a Stifle Bird. You cycle it and you can stifle an ability. So you counter target activated ability or triggered ability. It really feels good, getting someone with that. And then a Miscalculate. It's just a counter spell, but it also cycles. Those are the useful cycle spells. And I just now realized we went over all that, but we did not. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm not doing this very well. But we didn't go over mana, so we need to talk about mana real quick. So we're going to talk about mana rocks. First, we have our Gilded Lotus. Good old Gildy is 5 mana, tap it, add 3 of any color to your mana pool. So obviously you have blue. We have a Mind Stone, which is for 2 mana. You get an artifact that taps for 1 colorless, or you can pay 1 and tap it and sacrifice it to draw a card. Pretty useful in the deck. A Build Your Own Lotus, Pyramid of the Pantheons. For 1 mana, you get this artifact. For 2, tap it, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, so it fixes, and you put a brick counter on it. After 3 brick counters, you get to tap it and add 3 mana of any color to your mana pool. Hedron Archive. For 4 mana, you get basically a bigger Mind Stone. Tap it to add 2 colorless to your mana pool instead. Pay 2, tap it, sacrifice it, draw 2 cards. So it's just, a double mana or Mind Stone. Soul Ring, because every deck has to have Soul Ring. 1, tap it, add 2 colorless. And then a Thran Dynamo. 4 mana, tap it to get 3 colorless. So that's the artifact ramp. Now we have mana manipulation doublers. We have 3. We have Cage Sun, we have Extraplanar Lens, and we have High Tide. So Cage Sun and Extraplanar Lens basically work the same way. They're artifacts. They enter the battlefield. This one you have to exile a land, and then this is why I recommend Snow Covered, is because of this card, because it exiles your islands, and then it says any land that taps for mana that has the name of the exiled card produces mana. So you can give other players extra blue mana if they have islands. So that's why you want Snow Covered, because not many people play Snow Covered, and it's just how it works. Cage Sun is only working for you, but you can name blue. All your blue creatures get 1/1, and then all your lands that add blue to your mana pool adds an additional blue. And then High Tide says whenever an island would be tapped for mana this turn, add an additional blue to your mana pool. So it's basically Extraplanar Lens for the turn, which is pretty good. But you need these 3 cards to really ramp out tomorrow and like some of the bigger spells, which we'll talk about. So we're going to talk about like your win conditions, air quotes, and combo spells. So first we're going to talk about our New Perspectives combo. So New Perspectives is a 6 mana enchantment. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you draw 3 cards. As long as you have 7 or more cards in your hand, you may pay 0 rather than paying a cycling cost. So all these spells with, like, the cycling cost being 2 or being 6 or something like that, you can pay 0 instead of doing that. So it makes a really interesting thing. On a side note, we also have a Fluctuator, which kind of does the same thing, except for less effective. And what you combo with these is a card called Telekinetic Bond. So let's slow roll this if the light would let me. So 5 mana, 2 generic blue for an enchantment. Whenever a player would discard a card from his or her hand, you may pay 1 in a blue. If you do, tap or untap target permanent. So here's the combo. With these 2 out and say something like a Gilded Lotus, or with, say, something like, where is it? Darn it. Like Gilded Lotus out. There we go. Or if you have like a mana doubler or something, or like you are tripling your mana on your lands, you can, and then you go to cycle a spell. You can, in response, tap this, add 3 blue, pay 2 of the blue to this, untap the Gilded Lotus, and tap the Gilded Lotus again to basically be netting 1 blue every time you cycle a spell. So because of that, you can and because a very large majority of your deck is cycling spells, and then the fact that Tomorrow himself lets you search deeper into your deck, search really deep into your deck, it almost guarantees that you're going to have a cycling spell unless you're just really unlucky. And then you just kind of like generate an absurdly large amount of mana. I mean, you could stack it with a few cards that I'm going to talk about later, with a card I'm going to talk about later, into your deck where you're only running cycling spells in the deck, so you could always guarantee that you're going to, draw a cycling spell, and then you're essentially going infinite. But how you do that is with a card like Elixir of Immortality. So because you are still limited with cycling spells, you do need a way to refill your deck with them, so Elixir is a great way to do that. Also, it keeps you alive against aggro players and Voltron alike. And also, if anyone knows what you're doing, that keeps you alive too. And also mill. So that's one of the combos. So essentially, what it is I took what's his name, the cycler that untapped stuff, and put him in an enchantment, and had to pay it. So there's a lot of ways you can do it. If say you resolved a High Tide and a mana doubler like a Cage Sun, you could target one of your islands. I will note that this guy, or these two plus Tomorrow on the board, like, will have enough devotion so you could target Nykthos, where you could generate 1 extra mana. Yeah, that one does require, must have Tomorrow, where these two do not need Tomorrow really that much. I mean, it helps, it fuels the deck, but it's not 100% needed. But this combo is also really elaborate and really fragile. And sometimes people really don't like to play against it if it's starting to do that. So I added another combo in the deck that's just more degenerate, and thanks to competitive EDH that I learned about. And that is Dramatic Scepter combo. So Isochron Scepter, 2 mana. It has Imprint, which is also on your Extraplanar lands, but this one asks for you to exile a instant or sorcery from your hand with converted mana cost 2 or less. So the instant or sorcery you exile is Dramatic Reversal, which says for a 1 generic, 1 blue, instant untap all non-land permanents you control. So if this is on this, and you have, say, something like Gilded Lotus again, or Gilded Lotus again, you tap the Gilded Lotus for 3 blue. Pay 2 of the 3 blue to cast a Dramatic Reversal. Dramatic Reversal says untap all your non-land permanents, so you untap your Isochron Scepter and your Gilded Lotus. You have 1 blue floating, now you have 4, go to 2, untap everything, and you infinitely loop this constantly. So this one's a lot more degenerate and more efficient. I honestly like the Telekinetic Bonds combo more because it's like more janky and really fun, where this one is actually just super efficient and will kill your opponents outright. But how do you do that, you might be asking, but you're like, well, these two, even though if you have a bunch of cycling spells, how do you get these two reliably? Well, that's where Muddle the Mixture gets in. So it's a 2 mana, 2 blue, counter target instant or sorcery spell. But it also has Transmute for the transmute cost of 1, 2 blue. You can discard this from your hand during any time you could cast a sorcery, and then you could search any card with a converted mana cost of 2. So that can grab you a lot of things in this deck, from counter spells and whatnot, but it primarily grabs you one of these two pieces. If you didn't know, Isochron Scepter's 2, and Dramatic Reversal's 2. So if you have one of these pieces and that in your hand, Muddle the Mixture in your hand, you can go and get one of the other 2 pieces. So you can just go infinite right then and there if you wanted. But that's the infinite combos. I will note another thing with Dramatic Reversal, or the Dramatic Scepter combo, in a second. But we're going to talk about how do you get... let's talk about other win cons before we talk about how you actually find these win cons in the deck. So one win con, and this one's like the weakest, is Abandoned Sarcophagus. You may cast non-land cards with cycling from your graveyard. If a card with cycling would be put into your graveyard and it wasn't cycled, exile it instead. So basically this is your creature beats and your card value. Also, it's a gotcha card when you play like enchantments and instants and sorceries from the graveyard, like counter spells and stuff like that. So it's a pretty good, but this is like your last ditch effort of winning the game, I will say. Lab Maniac, I should note, with Tomorrow he replaces your draw effect. So if you want to play the good old Lab Maniac and win, you have to make sure Tomorrow's not on the board because he replaces your draw. I should also note that if Tomorrow's on the board and you have no cards in your library, he replaces that draw so you do not lose the game to that draw. But if he's on the board, you do not win that game to the draw. So you have to kill Tomorrow if you want to win by Lab Maniac. And the same happens with our last win con, which is Psychosis Crawler. 5 5 mana, power and toughness is equal to the number of cards in hand. Whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses a life. So again, Tomorrow replaces the draw effect with his anticipate effect. So sadly, Psychosis Crawler does not drain people life. So you have to kill off Tomorrow if you're going to draw a bunch of cards real quick. And those are the win cons. So now, how do you find those win cons, you might be asking? Well, we play a lot of draw spells. Mind's Aglow, this is a great draw spell in decks that really don't mind if your opponents are drawing a bunch of cards too, because you want to, get value off them quicker. So 1 blue for a sorcery with joined forces. Starting with you, each player may pay X amount, or any amount of mana. Each player draws X cards, where X is the number of mana paid for this way. So on turn like 1, and no one had any plays except for maybe a Soul Ring. On your turn 2, you could be like, well, I'm going to Mind's Aglow for 1, and then everyone around you pays like 2 or 3 into it, and everyone draws like 4 cards. So that's a pretty great draw. It's a good politics card and stuff like that too. And this is another great politics draw spell. This is Jace Beleren, but he's the anime one. If you didn't know, he's all Japanese and foil and anime style. But for 1 generic, 2 blue, if you don't know what he does, you get a Planeswalker that has a +2. Each player draws a card. -1, target player draws a card. -10, target player puts the top 20 cards of their library into the graveyard. And that's, all he does. Basically, because he doesn't really get killed that often, is unless you start -1ing him. But if you keep +1ing it or +2ing him, no one really targets him because he gets, he gets to draw. And while, everyone gets to draw a card, you get to look at 3 and pick one. So you're getting the most advantage out of this guy. More savvy players that play against this deck really do target him now. This one's a really dumb one. Some people say I should take it out, and I kind of agree, but it also is pretty fun. This one's called Distant Memories. So it's a 4 mana, 2 generic, 2 blue, sorcery that says search your library for a card, exile it. That means you exile it face up, then shuffle your library. Then you shuffle your library. Then you shuffle your library. I drew a blank there because my phone's doing something dumb. If no player, then you can go around the table and ask, can I put this card in my hand that I exiled? So if anyone says no, yes, you put that card in your hand, and that's what happens. But if no one lets you do it, you draw 3 cards. So it's completely like a catch-22 kind of situation where, like, if you go and grab, say, like Dramatic Reversal, you could be bluffing, Isochron Scepter, Dramatic Reversal combo, and then they won't let you have it, and you get to draw 3 cards if that's your plan. Or you could, put something that, helps everyone, but will help you more, like, again, Jace Beleren or something like that. And you'll get to, draw everything, which is also pretty sweet. I like the card. It's like a mono blue tutor that's cheap. We've got next a Fascination. This one's a pretty great one. 2 blue and X. Focus, please. There we go. 2 blue and X. Each player draws X cards, or choose one. Each player draws X cards, or each player puts the top X into the graveyard. Definitely only choose the draw X cards. It's really good. These are one of your ways that you win with the Dramatic Reversal, the Dramatic Reversal and Telekinetic Bond combos. Is you make just a large amount of mana and then just make everyone draw out their entire deck. We have Brain Geyser. Target player draws X cards. Must draw X cards for the same cost as Fascination. At sorcery speed, it's another way to kill someone straight out, and also just draws you a massive amount of cards. Ugin's Insight. This one's a good one. 5 mana, 3 generic, 2 blue. Scry X, where X is the highest converted mana cost of cards you control. If you have anything like New Perspectives or Tomorrow Azami's Familiar out, you're scrying 6, so it's a pretty good card. And then you draw 3. No blue decks complete without Mystic Remora. 1 blue for an enchantment with cumulative upkeep 1. Whenever a player would cast a non-creature spell, you draw a card unless they pay 4, which is pretty damn good in this deck. Another draw X spell, Skyscribing. This one has Forecast, which is pretty cool too. Forecast is you may pay the forecast cost, which is in this case is 2 and blue. Reveal Skyscribing from your hand. Each player draws a card. So it's basically for the same cost as Skyscribing for 1, but you also get to keep the card. So that's pretty cool. Prosperity. Each player draws X cards for X and a blue. Really good. So here's the card that I was talking about that you could stack your deck like however you want. If you get a Elixir of Immortality out, is you just basically Treasure Cruise, draw 3, and delve away everything that's not a cycle card, and then, you know, put everything that's in your graveyard back into your deck, draw until you get Treasure Cruise again, and repeat the process until you stacked your deck, basically. But yeah, this is a really great card. Delve is just a broken mechanic, and you dump so many cards into your graveyard so fast that this is just a great card. And then, just like no blue deck is complete without a Mystic Remora, no blue deck is complete without a Rhystic Study. It's Rhystic Remora for cheaper, and it also hits creatures, so really good. And then finally, a pull from tomorrow. Just another target draw X card spell. This one only hits you though, so but I wanted to run it because it says tomorrow in the name, and you know tomorrow is always familiar. So that's all the like draw spells and stuff. We have a few other housekeeping cards. We have a Trophy Mage. This allows you to grab your Abandoned Sarcophagus or your Extraplanar Lens. Those are your only 2 targets with this, sadly, but those are really good targets, so I keep her in. Then we have some removal. We have 2 forms of creature destruction. We have a Pungify and a Rapid Hybridization. They do the same thing. They destroy a creature and then put a 3/3 into play. One's a 3/3 green ape, one's a 3/3 green frog lizard. Both of these are necessary to either kill your tomorrow, so that you can win with Lab Maniac, or what's his name? The spider. I forgot his name already. What is his name? Oh no. Psychosis Crawler. There we go. So that's one way to do it, or you can actually hold these up and kill Problem Child cards. Really useful. I recommend running these guys. They're getting pretty expensive, so you want to pick them up now if you're going to use them. And then 2 board wipes, air quotes. We have Cyclonic Rift, probably the best blue spell in Commander. Everyone runs it. I recommend running it. Just do it. And then Eviction. Wow. Return all creatures to their owner's hands. Since you only play like 2 or 3 creatures in a game, this doesn't really affect you at all. It hoses board like go wide strategies and token strategies and things like that. So recommend playing it. Those are to clear your way for combos, by the way. So now we're going to talk about the silver border cards. First, I should note the cards that would get in if I wasn't running these silver border cards is a Propaganda. This is a great card. Stops people from attacking you. A Drakehaven, also a great card because you're cycling, and if you have enough mana, you can just like keep dumping out 2/2s. Pendril Mist. This one's really good. It's a Tabernacle on an enchantment. Really good card. 1 island because I just wanted to cut out an island for one of these cards. It's just fair. And then a Balance of Power. If a player is drawing more cards than you, this is just a great card. But it's meh. It's really underwhelming a lot of times in my play group, so I don't play it. So, now we're going to talk about the cards that I am putting in that are silver border, starting with a Kindslaver. I just really like Kindslaver. It's a really cool card. And, you know, it's just fun. Like, that's all I have to say about that one. Doesn't really do anything unique or cool. It's just really fun. Clocknapper. This one's really great as well. Taking someone's draw phase, well, essentially their beginning focus. Why are you not focusing? Anyways, for 5 mana, you get a 2/2 Human Spy, but she enters the battlefield, and you can choose beginning phase, pre-combat main phase, combat, post-combat main phase, or ending phase. And then you get to take that from your opponent. So during their turn, you take that turn as if it was yours. So I recommend also always going for the beginning phase because you get the untap, the upkeep, and the draw. So you just completely ruin them. They do not untap, they do not have an upkeep, and they do not get to draw. So if you have any upkeep effects, or if you have anything that really cares about draws or anything like that, you always take that. And she's so good. Only 5 mana for a 2/2. In Commander, that's not really that bad, especially when you're trying to slow down the game anyways. So she's an auto-occlude in here. Next one is a very cryptic command. This one has untap 2 permanents. Tap each permanent creature target player controls with exactly 1 word in its name. Discard all cards in your hand, then draw that many cards or return an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. This one's really great in my opinion. You can untap 2 lands or 2 mana rocks, so that's pretty great. You can also return any of your instants or sorceries, like your Pongifies, your High Tides, or any of your cycling spells. And then you can also just will yourself if you really need to. So this one is one of in my opinion, one of the better ones. Like, you really don't ever get to the tap thing. I mean, I guess you get to tap all their basics, but meh. I don't know. That effect isn't the good one in my opinion, but that one's probably one of my better versions of Cryptic Command I've seen. Split Screen. This one's a fun one. 4 mana. You deal your deck into 4 decks, and then you play with the top revealed. Mainly I play this because it gives you a lot of information and a lot of options, and options in Magic is very good, so that's why I play it. It's also really fun and goofy. And this last one is fun and goofy and has an infinite combo with Dramatic Reversal Scepter combo, which is really cool. And that is Stormcrow, or Crowstorm. So, Crowstorm, if you didn't know, is a pretty sweet card, 3 mana for a sorcery that says create a 1/2 bird token with flying that's named Stormcrow. And then it has Storm on it. Super, super, super good. So if you didn't know, the dramatic scepter combo makes infinite storm count. So if you have, again, Gilded Lotus or a Soul Ring or anything that produces any amount of mana that's 2 or more, you could just do this infinitely, or an arbitrarily large amount of times, if you will. And then you have a very large amount of Storm because it casts this spell, and Storm only cares if you cast it. So you make infinite Storm with this. So a lot of times in CEDH, people will play cards like Aetherflux Reservoir and Tendrils of Agony and stuff like that to really do the Storm combo. But I'm running Crowstorm mainly because I really like the Stormcrow token, and also I just really like this card. It's so good. I wish it was in black border so bad. But this is just like a bonus if this happens, but it's not only in here for that, because I can just, play a bunch of spells if I wanted to cast it. But yeah, that's the deck tech with all the silver bordered dumbness. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Tomorrow is one of those really sweet commanders that you don't get to see that often, and when you do actually get to see it played, it's like really dumb, and it's kind of like I don't know how to explain it. If you've ever seen Loading Ready Runs Friday nights where Jared talks about combos, which was one of the really early ones, where he says that a deck or building a combo deck is like assembling a gun from IKEA, where if it works perfectly, it kills someone in the process and looks cool doing it, but 90% of the time it kind of backfires and kills you instead. It's kind of what this deck does, and it's a lot of fun to play, and people will sit there and that aren't in the game and will watch you do your turn, and they'll be like, why are they letting you just do that? And you're like, well, they can't really interact with it because it's all cycling spells. It's just a lot of fun. If you guys are looking for a really fun deck, I'd recommend this. And it's pretty sweet. And thanks again, guys, for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Bye.